Xavier, it's my great pleasure to welcome you here to the Business School of the University of Edinburgh for this event of the Asia-Scotland Institute. And we have with us Xavier Rolet, who is the Chief Executive of the London Stock Exchange Group, in our series of business leader discussions. Xavier, the topic we're going to talk about today, and you're going to speak to us about, is what small enterprises and medium enterprises and entrepreneurs can do in order to raise funding to grow, a critical issue for any companies wishing to engage with and do business in Asia, for example, which is one of the thrusts of what the Asia-Scotland Institute is about. And I know you're going to talk to us later to a larger group, but perhaps you could explain to me what's on your mind and what you believe the options and parameters are for companies looking for funding.
Well, Roddy, first of all, thanks for having me here with you. It's always a pleasure being in Scotland, and Edinburgh in particular. I find it a very energizing country, particularly for a Frenchman. What I would say, and this really drives what everybody's seeking to achieve today, is creating growth, creating jobs, and where they're going to come from. It's fine to think of fiscal policies, it's fine to think of changing this or that part of the regulatory environment or the legal environment, but ultimately, where is the biggest potential for growth? And in the context of what the Asia-Scotland Institute is doing, how can we focus that on opportunities that are unique for Scotland, but unique in terms of the growth opportunities that Asia and in general emerging markets are offering today. And the basic point that we've been seeking to develop at the London Stock Exchange Group, where equities and equity raising and capital raising is obviously a very important part of the activities, what underpinned our recent initiative, 1,000 companies to inspire Britain, is that growth, those good paying jobs that are leveraging the university system, that are leveraging the tradition of innovation and scientific research, are going to come out of the small and mid-sized enterprise sector. And if you look in aggregate, it's clear that everybody would agree today that government jobs are essentially a thing of the past as governments seek to deleverage. In the European Union, in aggregate, there are today 26 million unemployed people looking either part-time or full-time job. There are, on the flip side, 23 million SMEs. So it's simple to do the math. And we can see the same thing in the UK. Actually, the United Kingdom today, and Scotland in particular, are really doing much better than the European average. There are 4.5 million of those SMEs residing in the UK, and Scotland in particular has a very large contingent of them. So our main point is that the source of these good jobs, of that growth in employment and the preservation of the wealth that actually funds our welfare system and many of the other things we've come attached to, is going to come primarily from the small and mid-sized enterprise segment.
Many people would say, well, why can't entrepreneurs and those with small and medium-sized enterprises turn to the banks? We hear Vince Cable cajoling the banks to lend more to small companies. Why is bank finance not an obvious route to go, and why are the markets better?
And that has been the model in Europe. That is the tradition. When you think financing, you think bank loan. And in fact, today, a little over 75% of all corporate funding or financing within the European Union, and Scotland is no exception, comes from traditional sources of bank lending. What we're saying actually is two things. There are other ways. There are ways to diversify that funding ecosystem at a time when banks, for a number of reasons, remain excessively leveraged or can engage because of new accounting rules, new leverage ratios, regulatory pressure to deleverage, and many other things. Basel III comes to mind, can no longer consider expanding a significant portion of their balance sheets to lend to SMEs. But there's a deeper, more structural element. Is in the case of startups, the very, very young companies, the ones that tend to go bust in the first 3 years of their existence, but fundamentally are the new source of wealth creation. I'll give you an interesting statistics. If you look at the 500 largest startups in the last 25 years of human history, the 500 largest startups with us today, only one comes out of the European Union. 28 come out of California, over 50 out of China. So we do have a deficit in terms of startup, and our point there is this. Bank lending actually isn't a suitable way of financing what are risky businesses who actually don't need a source of capital that is going to require the payment of interest, a source of capital that often requires a lien, some sort of mortgage of security, and actually doesn't suit the bank's risk profile itself. Given the risk of potentially the company failing, the proper type of financing is equity, where upside is unlimited, and where, of course, there's no need to pay interest from the get-go.
Now, many people may not know that although you are the chief executive of the London Stock Exchange Group and held senior positions in banking, you yourself are also an entrepreneur. And I know, because you've been speaking about it elsewhere before, that you had to go out and raise funding for a very early stage company. And how difficult was that? And where did you end up getting your backing from in the end?
Well, that was a biotech company, so that's kind of far up in terms of the risk spectrum. A company that actually specializes in things like diabetes, Crohn's disease, and bioinformatics. So it's really cutting edge. We did try to raise capital, first of all. I think my scientist friends hired me with a view to help in the capital raising. I have to say, after over a year and a half of trying, we gave up on Europe. Just simply because there is very, very little capital available earmarked specifically for high-tech, innovative startups. Ultimately, we ended up going to the US. It was before my time at the LSE. That company today is headquartered out of Boston. But the point is this. If bank lending isn't the right, which it isn't, the right way of financing the startups, what is? Is there capital available? The response to that is capital today in Europe is more than plentiful. There are actually trillions of pounds, euros, and other currencies available sitting there, gathering nothing, effectively sitting in bank accounts, whether individual or corporate, that could be invested in startups. We do need to think, though, of a recalibration of our fiscal and regulatory system. Today, debt, particularly bank debt, benefits from a tax deductibility and therefore a subsidy granted by all citizens, whereas equity as an asset class is taxed 4 times through its life cycle. The corporate income, the capital gains, dividend taxation, and also a unique form of financial transaction tax that we owe William III in 1698, called the stamp duty. I'm told this was to finance yet another war against the French.
Probably.
The good news is the authorities in the UK, and I think there's increased awareness as well in Scotland, given the track record of Scottish companies to innovate, and this is not a new one, this has been around for a long time, that the system needs to be recalibrated. The London Stock Exchange Group in the last 3 years has taken a series of initiatives to promote the cheaper supply of equity capital, the launch of the high growth segment, actions taken together with other industry participants that have led the government to agree to repeal the stamp duty for AIM stocks, inclusion of AIM stocks in ISAs, for example, as well as several other courageous actions around the enterprise investment scheme, CDIS, and many other actions. And we've seen in the last 9 to 12 months a remarkable turnaround in the capital raising scene in the United Kingdom. And I believe, and my colleagues do at the LSE Group, that this has been a fundamental factor in the much faster and much broader than expected recovery in the UK economy, which not only sets the UK apart from its European neighbors, doesn't take much analysis to realize that the UK is actually growing faster than the European average, but actually is putting the UK in pole position together with the United States in terms of Western countries and economic growth.
We're going to look at that in greater detail when we speak, but in conclusion, really, I wanted to ask you this question. Our mission here is to equip tomorrow's leaders in Scotland with the knowledge and the skills to engage or re-engage with Asia in a way that their forebears did. We both know that there were Scotsmen all over the world, in America and particularly in Asia. And that's our mission. We hope to achieve it. Is that a commendable mission? And do you think it is something that deserves to be successful?
I think it will be successful. It's actually quite exciting coming here to give my modest speech this evening. I've already been tweeted for the last week, but very enthusiastic, very highly motivated students here at the Edinburgh School of Business. I can see already the enthusiasm, and I do hear when I travel up and down the country that academics, scientists within the academic institutions of renown are themselves thinking how they can convert that excellence into practical startups. So I know the ingredients are here. We have outstanding, world-leading academic excellence in the area of scientific and other forms of innovation. We have a young population that is not looking at careers in large companies or government as a single source of expansion. We have plenty of capital, and we now have the schemes, whether it's high growth segments, AIM and many others, the order book for retail bond also, which provides fixed income long-term, cheap long-term debt to SMEs. We have the schemes to direct that capital. I think the UK is going to go from strength to strength, and I'll remind you a study, or I'll call your attention to a study that actually I think you mentioned to me earlier today about the UK being expected over the next 20 years to take the lead amongst European economies. It is because of the unique connectivity between academia and the world of entrepreneurs that, to me, doesn't exist anywhere else in Europe. I'll give you a simple statistic. Again, going back to jobs and employment, 26 million unemployed in the EU, 23 million SMEs. Clearly, that's the solution, job per SME. But of those 23 million SMEs, 4.5 million, i.e. the largest contingent, are based in the UK. So unique opportunity. I think Scotland historically has played a really very senior pole position, very senior role in terms of expanding those entrepreneurial opportunities. It's led the world in finance theory and many other things. There's no reason why Scotland could lead the way.
Well, Xavier, thank you. And again, we are so glad that you're here.
My pleasure.
I know that you're going to be welcomed by a large audience in a minute, and grateful to you for coming up to Scotland and for being with us tonight in Edinburgh. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Rolet.